I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, really proved myself, they'd finally see me for more than just the youngest in the room, more than the only daughter. I thought they'd see me as someone worthy of carrying on the family legacy. My name is Isabella Rodriguez. If the name sounds familiar, it's probably because of Rodriguez Family Restaurants, the beloved Mexican-American dining chain that built its reputation across Southern California. What most people don't realize is that the family in our name wasn't just warm marketing. It was a boundary. Clear and firm. It meant this empire belonged to the men who carried our blood. As a child, I constantly trailed behind my father and older brothers through restaurant kitchens and dining rooms. While they discussed profit margins and made decisions about locations, I was handed menus to stack and told to help in the kitchen. My ideas for modern branding or updated uniforms were met with patient smiles or dismissive waves. Creative, they'd call me, like I was a little girl playing with dolls, adorable but not to be taken seriously. Still, I didn't complain. I took every summer job they offered, worked every weekend shift, and handled every small task they assigned me. I studied supply chain management, analyzed customer feedback, and understood our restaurant operations better than our general manager. By 27, I had a fashion business degree, something no one else in the family had pursued. By 29, I was designing all our employee uniforms and managing our visual branding. But achievements don't matter when your family sees them as hobbies. When I first brought up modernizing our brand during a family meeting, suggesting we update our image to attract younger customers, my father cut me off mid-sentence. "You don't understand our business, Isabella," he said firmly, his voice filling the room with authority. I felt my chest tighten. "What do you mean?" He didn't look up from his papers. He just kept reviewing the monthly reports like I wasn't sitting right there. "This business was built by men who understand food and tradition. You're talented with your designs, yes, but this isn't about pretty pictures. You don't have the business instinct." My oldest brother Carlos smirked from across the table. My mother Sophia looked down at her coffee. No one defended me. Not even my uncle Antonio, who had quietly told me several times that my ideas could save our struggling locations. "You're too focused on appearances," my father continued, like he was giving me helpful advice. "You care too much about what things look like, not enough about what brings in money. That's not business leadership, Isabella. That's just decoration." I forced myself to stay calm. This meeting was supposed to change everything. I had spent weeks creating a complete rebranding proposal, including new uniforms, updated menus, and a social media strategy targeting younger families. But all they saw was their little girl playing dress-up with the family business. Later that evening, I sat alone in the small office space they'd given me for my design work. My father appeared in the doorway without warning. "You know," he said casually, "your brothers aren't perfect, but they understand what it means to be a Rodriguez man. You've always been more of an artist." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "You mean someone with vision?" He narrowed his eyes. "No. I mean someone who thinks having pretty ideas is the same thing as having business sense." He looked at me like I was invisible. "You were never the business-minded one. You just worked harder to make up for it." Then he walked away, just like that. But that line burned into my memory. "You were never the business-minded one." He meant it to cut me down. But to me, it became fire. I sat in the silence of my small office, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my computer. The room felt cold and empty, but for once I didn't want to cry. I felt electric, more focused than I had been in years. If they didn't want to make room for me at their family table, then fine. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to fight for their leftover approval. I would leave and create something beautiful, something they couldn't dismiss. One day they'd look back and wish they had listened to me. That moment, though they couldn't see it, was the last time they would treat me like I didn't matter. They had dismissed me. But I was already sketching out a future of my own. You'd think after everything my father said, I'd finally give up and disappear quietly. Maybe I should have. But a stubborn part of me still believed that if I could show them one more brilliant idea, something they couldn't argue with, they'd finally understand my worth. So I did what I had always done. I threw myself into work. I spent weeks creating a complete modernization proposal that could have transformed Rodriguez family restaurants for the next generation. I researched industry trends, studied changing customer preferences, and tracked the rise of sustainable dining. I discovered an perfect opportunity: eco-conscious fast casual dining with locally sourced ingredients and modern, Instagram-worthy aesthetics. It was the future of family restaurants, and no one in our market was doing it right yet. We could be pioneers. We could lead the change. I designed everything from the ground up: new uniforms, updated logos, even redesigned restaurant layouts. I reached out to my fashion industry contacts for feedback and advice. I booked our main conference room and sent professional meeting invites to the entire family leadership team. I still remember how my hands shook as I presented each design board. I remember the heavy silence. No one met my eyes. And then I saw my father's expression. Not impressed, not curious, just that tight smile he gave people who were wasting his time. When I finished, the room felt frozen. I looked at my brothers. They sat back in their chairs like they were waiting for the real presentation to begin. My uncle Antonio stared at his phone, completely checked out. Then my father spoke. "Are you finished?" he asked. I nodded. He sighed heavily, then turned to Carlos and Diego. "Would you explain to your sister why this fashion show nonsense would destroy our reputation in 6 months? Carlos chuckled. "Isabella, no offense, but this isn't Project Runway. You can't just throw trendy designs at a family restaurant and call it a business plan. Sustainable dining? Instagram walls? Who exactly do you think our customers are? Food bloggers?" The room erupted in quiet laughter. But I wasn't playing around. "The research supports this direction," I said, my pulse pounding. "My gut tells me," my father interrupted, "this is just a hobby project. If you want to play fashion designer, fine, but not with our family business. This is about food and tradition, not your art school fantasies." He stood up. "You want to create something? Go ahead. Start your own boutique. See how far that gets you. But don't come in here acting like you understand our world, because you don't. You never have." That phrase, "you never have," hit me like a punch to the stomach. I looked around the table, hoping someone would speak up for me. But all I saw were knowing looks and quiet smirks. My mother Sophia wasn't even in the room. She rarely attended business meetings anymore. I silently collected my presentation boards. As I reached the door, my younger brother Diego called out with a grin. "Hey, if the fashion thing doesn't work out, I heard Forever 21 is hiring. You could help them fold clothes." Their laughter echoed behind me as I walked out, but I refused to turn around. Because in that moment, I realized they had pushed me out of their circle, but I was going to create my own. And this time, they wouldn't get an invitation. Just like that, I understood this wasn't my family anymore. Not in any way that mattered. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, or even their business partner. I was just someone who happened to share their name, like wearing a coat that never quite fit. I didn't break down in front of them. But when I got home to my small apartment, everything crashed over me at once. The hurt, the fury, the humiliation, it all hit me in crushing waves. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and told to be thankful for whatever scraps they threw my way. Years of feeling invisible. I wanted to shout. I wanted to tear down everything they had built. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out a suitcase. And the next morning, I disappeared without a goodbye. I walked away from their narrow expectations, from a legacy that was never meant to include me. I left the conference room where I was never truly wanted. I stepped into the unknown. I moved to Los Angeles where no one knew my story. Where I wasn't Isabella Rodriguez, the restaurant owner's daughter who didn't know her place. I was just Isabella, a woman with a vision, talent, and nothing left to lose. I rented a tiny studio apartment in the fashion district that smelled like fabric dye and coffee from the shop downstairs. And there, at a small drafting table with my laptop and sketchbooks, I opened a new file. No family name, no pressure, just me. The start of something they would never see coming. Being dismissed has a unique kind of strength. When no one's paying attention, you can create without boundaries. No judgment, no interference, just pure freedom. In that cramped space with exposed pipes and a temperamental air conditioner, I began designing something that would eventually reshape everything. I didn't have their restaurant money, but I had something more valuable: purpose. No more trying to prove my worth. No more begging for their approval. I was finished with all of that. I named the company Terra Verde. It meant green earth, representing both sustainability and growth from the ground up. That's exactly who I was, someone planted in new soil, ready to bloom into something powerful. The early days were brutal. I burned through my savings in 3 months. I survived on ramen noodles and energy drinks, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. I pitched my design services to anyone who would take a meeting: small restaurant owners, boutique hotels, and even food truck operators dreaming of brick-and-mortar locations. Most turned me down, but a few took a chance. And I treated those first projects like they were Fortune 500 accounts. I threw everything I had into each one. I created sustainable uniform designs for clients who wanted modern, eco-conscious branding. It was a tiny market, but the hunger was real. I handled everything myself: design, fabric sourcing, production coordination. I juggled every role because giving up simply wasn't possible. I didn't just want to make it. I wanted to outshine them, and I wanted to do it on my own terms. Within a year, I had a team of 4, a small design studio, and a waiting list of clients. We weren't making headlines yet, but the right people in the industry were starting to notice. Quietly, we were building momentum. My family had no clue I was still in their world. They didn't understand that what I had launched wasn't just another design company. It was their direct competition. I kept tabs on Rodriguez family restaurants. It wasn't difficult. They were still getting local press coverage, still acting like they dominated the market, but they hadn't evolved. They were frozen in their traditional approach, missing how fast the industry was changing. They were riding their reputation while the future left them behind. So I got strategic. I hired a former brand manager from one of their biggest competitors. Together, we created a company that spoke directly to the customers my father had always overlooked: young families, health-conscious diners, and environmentally aware consumers who wanted restaurants that were fresh, sustainable, and Instagram-worthy. We made our aesthetic clean, modern, vibrant, everything they refused to become. And slowly, quietly, we started becoming the name restaurant owners were talking about. I didn't celebrate when we officially launched. That was just the foundation. Quietly, we began competing for mid-level restaurant chain contracts, the same accounts my father's restaurants used to secure automatically. But the landscape had shifted. Now they were losing customers to an unknown design firm with innovative concepts, faster delivery, and a drive they never saw coming. They had no idea who was behind it. I liked keeping it that way. Behind the scenes, I started recruiting talent. I reached out to the undervalued professionals, the assistant managers, creative staff, and service workers who had been dismissed for too long. People like me who were exhausted from being overlooked. People who didn't just want recognition. They wanted to work somewhere they truly mattered. One by one, they came to Terra Verde. Our small company started gaining real recognition, and my family still had no idea. About 18 months in, I sat in a meeting with a major restaurant group. They were deciding between Rodriguez family restaurants and us for their complete rebrand. I had seen my father's presentation: predictable, outdated, and uninspiring. Then they reviewed ours. "Who is Terra Verde?" the client asked, flipping through our proposal. "This is brilliant. It's exactly what we've been searching for but couldn't articulate." I simply smiled. Someone who refuses to accept limitations. We secured the contract. And by the end of that quarter, we'd outbid Rodriguez family restaurants on 4 major restaurant chain deals. Each victory pushed them further from their comfort zone. Their family name no longer carried the influence it once had. Their market position was weakening. And I was just getting warmed up. Still, I kept quiet. I let them dismiss us. Let them underestimate our capabilities. I let them think I had vanished from their world completely. Because by the time they discovered who was really challenging them, it would be too late to recover. They say pride comes before a fall. But in my father's case, pride constructed the fall one stubborn decision at a time. From the outside, Rodriguez family restaurants still appeared solid. Bright locations, delivery trucks with fresh logos, local newspaper features. But I could see the weak spots developing. The foundation was beginning to crack. It started with a canceled casino restaurant contract in Nevada, a deal they considered guaranteed. The client mentioned differing visions, but I knew what really happened. We'd presented a more compelling concept with better execution and competitive pricing. Then the staff departures began. First a few line cooks, then their longtime hostess manager, then a regional supervisor I used to know, someone who would never have left voluntarily before. She reached out to me about opportunities. I didn't gloat. I just forwarded her an offer letter. Welcome to Terra Verde. The major blow came 8 months later. Rodriguez lost a huge contract to rebrand a West Coast hotel chain's restaurant spaces, work they assumed was theirs automatically. They didn't even compete seriously for it. They expected their reputation alone to seal the deal. But the hospitality world had evolved. Clients demanded innovation, flexibility, and authentic sustainability. We delivered exactly that. Their damage control statement blamed shifting market conditions and increased competition. They never named us, probably because they still couldn't identify who us actually was. But they could feel our presence growing stronger. I could see it in their desperate rebranding attempts, suddenly more colorful, suddenly eco-focused, suddenly trying way too hard. They mimicked our social media strategy, launched a rushed farm-to-table campaign. I nearly laughed out loud. They were hunting shadows, and the shadows were outmaneuvering them. Then came the whispers, poor management, family arguments, cash flow problems. I didn't spread them. I didn't have to. Truth finds its own way out. And thus? We just kept creating. Anxiety has a way of settling in slowly. My family was beginning to worry, though nobody would say it directly. One evening, I attended a hospitality industry conference, not as a presenter or vendor, just as a silent observer. I wanted to watch how Rodriguez family restaurants would position themselves now that they weren't the dominant force in the room. Their display was pushed toward the back corner. It looked smaller than previous years, with half the usual staff. My father Miguel wasn't there, but I spotted Carlos and Diego attempting to project confidence, though their discomfort was obvious. I maintained my distance close enough to watch, but far enough to avoid recognition. A restaurant owner approached their booth, someone I had pitched to just weeks before during a consultation. Carlos handed him a menu, smiling professionally. The man glanced at it and said casually, "Oh, I'm already working with Terra Verde. They're doing incredible work." Carlos tensed up. "Terra Verde," he repeated. The man nodded. "You should look into them. They're revolutionizing restaurant branding." He walked away. Carlos's professional smile disappeared instantly. He turned to Diego and whispered urgently, "Who the hell is Terra Verde?" I smiled to myself from across the room. The awakening had started. But the real breaking point came on a gray Tuesday morning. I was in my studio reviewing designs for a new sustainable restaurant concept when my assistant knocked, her face drained of color. "There's something you need to see," she said, handing me her laptop. On the screen was a news article. The headline read, "Rodriguez Family Restaurants Faces Health Department Investigation and Staff Complaints." It wasn't just bad press. It was a complete breakdown: health code violations, employee grievances, management chaos, and family disputes, all exposed publicly. There were anonymous employee quotes, some of whom had probably joined Terra Verde. My father's restaurant empire wasn't just struggling. It was falling apart. And now everyone could see it happening. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I closed the laptop, sat back in my chair, and breathed deeply. This had never been about getting even. It was about proving something, showing that I was never the impractical dreamer they claimed I was. I wasn't playing around in their business world. I was creating something genuine. While they were busy dismissing me, I was designing a future that didn't include them. What they never anticipated was that this future was about to become impossible to ignore. Some moments split your life into before and after. For me, it happened on a bright Wednesday morning. I was sipping café con leche, working on uniform designs for a new farm-to-table chain in Portland, when my assistant burst through the door. "Isabella," she said, out of breath, waving her phone. "You're going viral." I looked up, confused. "What?" She showed me the screen. There it was, Isabella Rodriguez, youngest Latina CEO in fashion, revealed as founder of Terra Verde Designs. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just a small industry piece. It was everywhere: Vogue Business, Fast Company. Even morning television was covering it. One headline jumped out at me: "The secret success, Terra Verde CEO revealed to be the daughter who outdesigned her family's restaurant empire." I didn't need to read the full story. I already understood what they were reporting. The girl dismissed from her family's business, underestimated, mocked for her creative ambitions, and now the CEO of a thriving sustainable fashion company reshaping the hospitality industry. There were quotes from former colleagues, footage from a panel discussion I'd participated in, and photos of me standing in front of Terra Verde's headquarters, modern, bright, and everything Rodriguez family restaurants had refused to become. Then came the final blow, a direct comparison of their recent struggles and our rapid growth. It wasn't diplomatic. The media had chosen sides for us. My phone exploded with calls. Messages flooded in. Congratulations from investors, journalists, and people I hadn't spoken to in years. The world now knew my name. And so did my family. The text that affected me most didn't come from reporters, investors, or industry contacts. It came from my mother, Sophia. Just one line: "Your father saw the article. He's been silent all morning." I stared at my phone, not with guilt, and not even with satisfaction. Just stillness. For years, he had told me I didn't understand their world. And for years, I believed that proving him wrong would somehow fill the empty space in my chest. But in that moment, while the media celebrated everything he tried to dismiss, I understood something that shifted everything: I didn't need his validation anymore. Later that same day, my publicist called. 60 Minutes wants an exclusive interview. Prime time, national audience. Are you interested? I hesitated. I hadn't built Terra Verde to become famous. I built it to be authentic. But maybe now it was time to tell my story. I took a breath. Let's do it. 4 days later, the interview went live. I wore a cream blazer, clean, confident. No flashy jewelry, no prepared speeches, no anger. Just truth. The host began with Terra Verde's remarkable growth. How a company with no family connections became a leader in sustainable hospitality design in under 4 years. Then came the question everyone was anticipating: is it true you're the daughter of Miguel Rodriguez? I smiled gently. Yes. Why keep that connection quiet? She asked. I didn't hide it, I said. I just stopped making excuses for not fitting their expectations. She looked surprised. And now you've created a company that's outpacing theirs? It's not about competition, I said, though we both understood it was. It's about creating something that honors who I am and giving others the space to do the same. The interview ended with thunderous applause from the studio audience. That night, Terra Verde's website crashed from overwhelming traffic. We received over 340 collaboration requests. Our valuation increased 23% within 48 hours. Venture capitalists started discussing international expansion. But while the industry celebrated my success, one place remained completely silent. The Rodriguez family WhatsApp group, still active, still there, but not one message. No congratulations, no sarcastic comments. Just empty space. Finally, a text appeared from Carlos: "You exploited our name." I didn't reply immediately. What could I say? They had used my silence to pretend I was irrelevant. Now everyone knew differently. The revelation hadn't transformed everything because it gave me power. It changed everything because it forced them to acknowledge what they had refused to acknowledge for so long: me. Isabella Rodriguez, the one they said would never understand business, never matter, just an artist destined to fail. But now I was the youngest Latina CEO in fashion. And my story was just beginning. It arrived in an elegant cream envelope with gold embossing. Rodriguez Family Annual Gathering. Sunday at 4 p.m. Hosted at the family home. No personal note, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just tradition. I held it for a long time. For years ago, they dismissed me from their business meetings. Told me I didn't belong in their world. Called me unrealistic. Now they were inviting me back to the same house where I had always felt like an outsider, never truly family. I hadn't been there since the day I left everything behind. But this year, I decided to accept. Not for their sake. For mine. That Sunday, I drove up to the family compound in a pristine white Tesla Model S. The choice? Plaid. Perfect for someone who had learned to move in silence but strike with precision. The security guard at the entrance recognized me immediately, his eyes widening with surprise. Without a word, he opened the gate. The circular driveway was crowded with expensive cars, Mercedes sedans, BMW SUVs, and a vintage Cadillac. But mine stood out differently. A single Tesla gleaming with understated innovation. I stepped out gracefully, wearing a tailored emerald dress. No designer labels visible, no need for ostentation. Just refined confidence. The kind that speaks without saying a word. As I approached the main entrance, the chatter from the garden party began to fade. Eyes followed my movement. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. They noticed me. Finally. But nobody seemed to know how to react. Inside, I moved through the foyer as if I had never left. Because this was my family home, whether they had made me feel welcome or not. My mother Sophia was the first to come over. Her expression softened, and for just a moment, I caught something in her gaze. Perhaps guilt. "You look beautiful, Mija," she murmured. "Gracias," I replied, then leaned closer. "But let's be honest with each other." She gave a tired, knowing nod. Of course. The gathering continued around us. Familiar faces everywhere, cousins, uncles, longtime family friends. By the outdoor bar, my brothers went rigid when they spotted me. Carlos's expression hardened. Diego's eyes darted to my car keys, then back to my face. I didn't pause for them. Instead, I walked through the house toward the back terrace, where my father stood by himself. He gazed across the gardens like a king surveying what remained of his weakening kingdom. When he heard my heels on the stone, he turned. And for the first time ever, Miguel Rodriguez looked diminished. "You decided to come," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard. "I did." He looked me over carefully. "You've built something impressive." I remained silent. He glanced away, visibly uncomfortable. "Isabella, I think I may have misjudged you." That almost made me smile. "You think?" "I didn't come here for apologies," I said evenly. "I came to close this chapter." He faced me again. "The restaurants are having problems. Your brothers." He caught himself. "We could really use your expertise." I looked into his eyes, steady, clear. Not bitter. Just finished. "You told me I'd never understand business," I said quietly. Just a dreamy girl with pretty ideas and no real sense. He couldn't argue with that. I gestured toward the house, the party, the fading empire. And now you need my help? His mouth opened, but I continued. I didn't come to rescue you, Papa. I created something without your approval. While you dismissed me, I innovated. While you underestimated me, I became everything you claimed I could never be. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Perfect, I said, turning to go. But before I left, I paused and looked back one final time. You were right about one thing, I told him. I'm nothing like you. And I'm grateful for that every single day. As I walked back through the house, people stepped aside automatically. There were murmurs and a few awkward smiles, but it didn't affect me. I wasn't there for their approval. I had nothing left to prove. I had already succeeded. Outside, the Tesla gleamed in the golden evening light. I slipped into the driver's seat, powered up the engine, and looked back, not at the house, but at the little girl I used to be, the one who had desperately wanted their acceptance. And I smiled. Because she wasn't asking for permission anymore. She was creating her own path. From that day forward, the world would always remember her name, Isabella Rodriguez. No longer the outsider, no longer the invisible one, no longer the daughter they tried to silence and forget. She became the woman who rewrote the story, ensuring that others like her would never be overlooked again.